Vintage stuff. Now, it's no secret that I like old things. For example, my vintage records, my 1950s vintage cooler, my trifold metal vintage table that my cooler sits on. And don't forget, my vintage knife that's inside my cooler. Comes from the same era as the cooler. Isn't that really cool? And don't forget my vintage animal shears that I use to cut the hair off of my vintage dog. Now don't get me wrong, although I do love the aesthetics, the feel, and the knowledge that vintage pieces that I own have been through more than I could fathom, I don't necessarily like the technology that's inside this flashlight. Just like my cooler when I got it, it had disgusting insulation. It didn't even insulate anymore. You would put ice in it and it would just condensate out through two walls of metal and the old school insulation. So I replaced the inside with brand new insulation but kept the external look of it. That's exactly what I'm going to be doing with this flashlight. And it actually still works. You see? But it doesn't put out that much power. So what I'm going to do in this video is basically give it some TLC. This thing is going to turn out to be a really cool camping flashlight. I'm going to do a comparison between this flashlight and my infrared pocket pen light, which this is 300 lumens and I'm assuming this is about 20 to 30. So this is the vintage light and this is my pen light. And I even managed to buy one of those LED conversion lights, but quite frankly, it's not really the conversion or the upgrade that you would think it is. I mean, it's a little better, but it's not to the level that I want it. So this, to me, is not good enough. So at this point of the video, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, if the LED light doesn't do it for you, what are you going to do? What other options are there? Well, this is a 500 lumen Duracell flashlight. You could probably guess where I'm going with this. Yes, I'm going to take this thing apart, take out that high powerful LED in there, and place it in the vintage light. I don't feel really bad about doing this because this flashlight, one, the switch is broken, two, I can't buy this switch separated from the flashlight. I have to buy the whole flashlight, and three, they don't make this flashlight anymore. So, yeah. And you're probably thinking to yourself through that, well, Steven, if you could do all this technical work on this flashlight, replace everything, why don't you just fix the switch? Shut up. It's a little challenging, but you know what? At the end of the day, that's going to look cooler than that. Now, here's the game plan. The first step we're going to do is actually the easiest, and that is to take this flashlight apart. So I got the LED light out. Now my biggest problem right now is the fact that this light requires 4.5 volts to run. And originally this flashlight used 3 C batteries. And the vintage flashlight that I want to put this light in holds 2 big D 1.5 volts. And that's fine, but it's not sufficient amount of energy to light this thing up. So what I'm going to have to do is obviously I'm going to have to get rid of the D batteries, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to place these 3 batteries inside the flashlight. Well, they fit, but there's just a lot of dead space in there. So to create the 3D printed part, all I'm going to do is measure the outer diameter of the big battery, the outer diameter of the small battery, and that's going to give me the dead space that I need to compensate for. And then after that, once I got the measurements, I just draw it up on the 3D printed program, which I'm using SketchUp, and let the 3D printer do its work. So while we wait for the 3D printer to do its thing, the next thing I'm going to do is actually attend to all this surface rust that's on the flashlight. Now, although I do like a little bit of patina, if it's manageable and it's easily fixable, then I would prefer to fix it. So what I'm going to do is grab some of this steel wool, put a little water on it, and just rub. And as you can see, most of the rust came off. There's still a little bit on the edges here, way better than it was before. And after a couple of minutes of scrubbing, it looks way better. So this is how the original housing of the light bulb goes. you have the cap in the back, and then you have your light bulb. Well, this is the new LED. So what I'm going to do is simple. I'm going to be placing the back end of this LED up against this metal housing. And this metal housing is important because that's what creates the circuit. When you turn it on and off, this is what contacts the metal housing right here. Once that's up against the housing, I'm going to be desoldering the LED, so I could put this in between. So essentially it's going to look like this. Before we put the housing on, the 3D part is printed, the batteries are in there. It works perfect. It's the same width as a D battery, so should be interesting to see if it works. I'm pretty sure it will, but the only thing I am worried about is still the length. First thing I'm going to do is remove the back spring. Let's see if that does anything. Alright, once we have everything capped off, let's test it out. So this is what the flashlight was even with the LED upgrade. Well, now this is the new 2.0 flashlight with the 500 lumens light. Side-by-side comparison, and it doesn't even come anywhere near it. Cool, so I call this project a success. I have a powerful vintage flashlight with a magnet.